Thank you for stopping by. I'm your political activist, Jeffrey Weiss, working to keep you informed of world events and exposing that which is cloaked. Today we discuss the new idiots in Trump's cabinet. Now that Trump has surrounded himself with people that think exactly as he does, policy is set. Take out Iran's nuclear facilities, regime change in Syria, destroy North Koreans' nukes. This is the mantra of John Bolton and Mike Pompeo. Most people don't even know that Pompeo was previously a member of the United States House of Representatives for Kansas' 4th Congressional District. You want more? No, that's it. Another egomaniac who thinks himself fit to guide our foreign policy. Arrogance and ignorance is a dangerous cocktail. John Bolton once suggested the UN would be no worse off if you blew up the top 10 floors of its headquarters. Former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, in an interview, said John Bolton was a lousy negotiator. It was remarkable that someone who spent that much time in the State Department, as smart as he was not an effective diplomat or even a negotiator. Now, what can go wrong with their plans? The War College did a simulation of a limited attack on Iran's nuclear sites. Day 1, the war with Iran. Just before sun rose over Tehran, moments before the Muslim call to prayer, the Israeli missiles struck their targets. Heavy U.S. bombers followed minutes later. Bunker busters and mini nukes fell on dozens of targets while Iranian anti-aircraft missiles sped forward. Iranian nuclear power plants crumbled to dust. Russian technicians and foreign nationals scurried to safety. Most did not make it. Targets carefully chosen months before by Pentagon planners were destroyed. The uranium enrichment facility, a heavy water plant, a radioisotope facility, fuel unit, uranium conversion facility, and nuclear technology center were struck simultaneously by United States Air Force and Israeli bomber groups. Iranian fighters rose in scattered groups, at least those Iranian fighter planes that had not been destroyed on the ground by a swift and systematic airstrike from U.S. and Israeli missiles. A few Iranian fighters even launched missiles, downing the occasional attacker, but American top guns quickly prevailed in the ensuing dogfights. The Iranian Air Force, like the Iranian Navy, never really knew what hit them. Like the slumbering U.S. sailors at Pearl Harbor, the pre-dawn preemptive attack wiped out fully half the Iranian defense forces in a matter of hours. By mid-morning, the second and third wave of U.S. Israeli raiders screamed over the secondary targets. The only problem now, the surprising effectiveness of Iranian missile defenses. The element of surprise was lost. U.S. and Israeli warplanes began fall from the skies in considerable numbers to anti-aircraft fire. At 7:35 a.m. Tehran time, the first Iranian anti-ship missiles destroyed a Panamanian oil tanker departing from Kuwait and bound for Houston. Launched from an Iranian fighter plane, the Exocet missile split the ship in half and set the ship ablaze in the Strait of Hormuz. A second and third tanker followed, black smoke billowing from the broken ships before they blew up and sank. By 8:15 a.m., all ship traffic in the Persian Gulf had ceased. U.S. Navy ships launched counterstrikes. Waves of U.S. fighter planes circled the burning wrecks in the bottleneck of Hormuz, but the Iranian fighters had fled. At 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, many hours into the war, CNN reported a squadron of suicide Iranian fighter jets attacking the U.S. Navy fleet south of Bahrain. Embedded reporters aboard the ships, sending live feeds directly to a rapt audience of Americans just awakening, reported all the Iranian jets destroyed, but not before the enemy planes launched dozens of Exocet and Sunburn anti-ship missiles. A U.S. aircraft carrier, cruiser, and two destroyers suffered direct hits. The cruiser blew up and sank, killing 600 men. The aircraft carrier sank an hour later. By mid-morning, every military base in Iran was partially or wholly destroyed. Sirens blared, fires blazed from hundreds of fires. Explosions rocked Tehran, and electric power failed. The Al Jazeera news station in Tehran took a direct hit. At 9:15 a.m. Baghdad time, the first Iranian missiles struck the green zone. For the next 30 minutes, a torrent of missiles launched on GPS coordinates carefully selected by Shia militiamen with cell phones positioned outside the green zone and other permanent U.S. bases. Although U.S. and Israeli bomber pilots destroyed 90% of the Iranian missiles, enough Shahs remained to fully destroy the green zone, the Baghdad airport, and a U.S. Marine base. Thousands of unsuspected U.S. soldiers died in the early morning barrage. Not surprisingly, CNN and Fox News withheld the great number of casualties from American viewers. By 9:30 a.m., gas stations on the East Coast began to raise their prices. Slowly at first, then altogether in panic. The prices rose to $4 a gallon, then $5, then $6. Then the prices skyrocketed. In Washington, D.C., the spin began minutes after the first missiles struck their intended targets. The punitive strike would further democracy and peace in the Middle East. Media pundits mostly followed the party line. By ridding Iran of missiles and mass destruction, Iran might follow the footsteps of Iraq and enjoy hard-won fruits of freedom. The president scheduled a speech for 2 p.m. Gas prices rose another $2 before then. China and Japan threatened to dump U.S. dollars. Gold rose $120 an ounce. The dollar plummeted against the euro. CNN reported violent anti-American protests in Paris, London, Rome, Berlin, and Dublin. Fast food franchises throughout Europe carrying American corporate logos were firebombed. A violent coup toppled the pro-American Pakistani president. On the New York Stock Exchange, prices fell in a frenzy of trading, except for the major petroleum producers, of course. A single Iranian Shahab missile struck Tel Aviv, destroying an entire city block. Israel vowed revenge and threatened a nuclear strike on Tehran. An orange alert in New York City suddenly reddened to a full-scale terror alarm when a package detonated on a Manhattan subway. Mayor Bloomberg declared martial law. Governor Pataki ordered the New York National Guard mobilized. The president looked shaken at 2 p.m. The scroll below the TV screen reported Persian Gulf nations halting production of oil until the conflict could be resolved. Venezuela announced a freeze in oil deliveries to the U.S. would begin immediately. Britain offered to mediate peace negotiations between the U.S. and Israel and Iran, but that was resoundingly rejected. By 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, gas prices had stabilized at just below $10 a gallon. A Citgo station in Texas, near Fort Sam Houston Army Base, was bombed. No one claimed responsibility. Terrorism was not ruled out. Regime change in Syria would lead to the same circumstances as Iraq and Libya. Sunni and Shias fighting to the last man, leaving a country in ruin, decades to rebuild. You would think that after two disasters, our brain trust would have seen the lunacy in attempting to do this a third time, what did not work the two previous times. This is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Now, an attack on North Korea. North Korea has 3,500 main battle tanks, 3,000 APCs, rocket launchers, towed and self-propelled artillery pieces, The ground forces have 7,500 mortars, several hundred surface-to-air missiles, 11,000 air defense guns, along with 10,000 surface-to-air missiles, all within striking range of Seoul. Estimates range from 1 million dead in a conventional attack to 10 million dead in a nuclear exchange. These men, Trump, Pompeo, and Bolton, should be shot with Thorazine, placed in straitjackets, and sequestered from any communication with the outside world. If my articles interest you, please use the link to check out my website and books. Thank you very much.